The second paper, Darwin's Ingenital Materials, Evolutionary Implications of Multi-Scale Competency in Developmental Biology. And both of these papers, the first two, they really just dropped in the last few months, right? April 2023. So these are hot off the presses for folks. I haven't really heard you talk about these in other podcasts. So it's great that we're getting a chance today to do that. And before we jump right into the paper, is this an allusion at all to the His Dark Materials book series? Like the title?
No, not
I was
really.
just
No, no.
okay, just wondering. I mean, that's a little bit of a flyer because it's Darwin's Materials. I was like, is there sort of a
Yeah, it does
alliterative?
sound like that, doesn't it? No, no,
Yeah, just a
not
little bit.
really. No.
Okay, cool. Yeah, just an aside. But would you mind? I mean, just like you did for the first paper, could you provide like a simple overview, and then I have a bunch of questions to
Sure,
ask you about it?
sure. Yeah. Um, let's start from this idea that and this I tried to formalize this in my TAME paper from a few years ago. This
Mm,
idea of a spectrum of, you can call it many things. It's a spectrum of persuadability. That's what I call it in the paper, a spectrum of agency. Just the idea that you can put any system on this continuous spectrum that that tries to capture how much autonomy the thing has from an engineering perspective. How much can I expect? How much problem solving chops does this thing have when I'm not around to force it? So and you can go from Legos to thermostats to animals that learn to humans, and then everything in between is there, right? Okay, so now we can ask the following question. As an engineer, and so this is another paper I wrote with Jamie Davies a few years ago, well, maybe a year ago, talking about engineering with agential materials, because engineering is very different based on where along that spectrum your parts are. If you are engineering with Legos, everything is on you. The only thing the Lego is going to do is keep its shape. That's all it knows how to do. So everything else is on you. Everything that you need to happen, you have to somehow make sure it happens. And this is how molecular synthetic biology works. You're going to put in circuits that do specific things. It's on you to implement every part of the functionality that you want. If you and so humans have been engineering with bricks and wood and metal for thousands of years, and you use a certain set of techniques to do that. What are those techniques? Well, they don't involve psychological tools. They involve very kind of low level, put everything where it goes and glue it down and attach this thing to that thing. That's your toolbox. Well, if you're building autonomous vehicles or self-guided missiles or houses or whatever, you've got some other stuff, which are, for example, thermostats. So if you've got a thermostat, it's interesting because you don't even necessarily need to know how the whole thing works. What you need to know is,
mm,
where is the set point and how do I change it, right? And what are the inputs and what are the outputs? Where does the thermometer go? Where does the connection to the heat, to the cooling and heating go? And what you know is that it's going to do certain things when you're not there to micromanage it. Do you have to leave rules for what to do at every single temperature level? You don't. It's going to do that on its own. So you've got some other tools, and these are the tools of cybernetics. So for more complex systems, you'll have control theory and all these kind of tools to deal with something that has a simple level of agency. It's got very basic, kind of primitive goals that it tries to set. And if you don't understand anything about cybernetics, you are not going to get the most out of these components, right? If you don't understand what homeostasis is, what goal-directed loops are, you're not really going to be very good at using those in your engineering. Okay.
mm,
And then you move forward and you say, okay, I'm a proprietor of a circus of a rat circus, and I want these rats to do little tricks, right? I want them to, and in the Jamie's paper, I think we talked about building a tower out of dogs. I could try the traditional route of stacking them on top of each other, but that isn't going to work. They're gonna crawl off. They're not going to just stay where I put them. So that doesn't work at all. I have to use a completely different set of tricks that people who work with wood and metal don't have to use. I have to train my material. I have to now on the one hand, it's a bit of a pain in the butt because your material has its own agenda and you have to have tools to manage it. But here's the beauty of it: once you've trained them to keep a little tower, if you knock it over, guess what it does? They get right back up on their own. You don't have to be there to rebuild it. Isn't that amazing? And so you've gained something very interesting by switching the bag of tools you bring to the problem. You've gained something interesting, and you were only able to do that because you recognize the agency of the material. You wouldn't do that, and right, you wouldn't do that if you didn't know, if you thought that these things are dumb, like bricks and Legos. So it's very important. And then you see this in all the way up. If you're a hacker, you might be hacking the computer, but you might be doing what they call social engineering, right? You might find out that it's much easier to just trick somebody giving you their password than to spend all day, brute forcing the hash table or whatever. So there's this has to be this impedance match between the tools you bring to the problem, and the successful engineer is one that recognizes what's the right level of agency in my material. And so that leads to the question for regenerative medicine. We have cells and tissues, and you ask, so what are the tools that I'm going to use there? And the assumption up until now, the assumption has been, well, they're like the bricks. You have to micromanage all of it. Yeah, that's been the standard assumption of the paradigm. But it's very much an open question. Are they more like the Legos, or are they more like the rats, or are they more like something in between? Or are they more like the thermostat, or where are they? And regenerative medicine is going to be cracked by the people who pick the right level. It's not going to be cracked by assuming the wrong level, nor down. So it's not going to happen if you assume these things are low agency machines. It's also not going to happen if you assume that they're magical, inexplicable, things that aren't going to obey any kind of rational rules. That's not going to work either. Somewhere in the middle, which is of course, what my lab tries to do, is to pick the right set of tools from cybernetics, from behavioral science to take advantage. Okay, so having said all of that, here's the thing with the paper. What I just took you through is how human engineers view the spectrum of agential materials, right? And so now it comes time to, so Jamie and I wrote that, and then I said, okay, so now what does evolution do? Evolution is also an engineer. So the question is, does evolution assume assume that these things are like Legos and work at the lowest level, which means search the really difficult and really rugged space of molecular properties? Or would evolution take advantage of the competency of the material? Because the thing about evolution is evolution doesn't work with Legos. Evolution works with cells. And cells and tissues used to be independent organisms. They don't come as blank slates that are dumb and have to be micromanaged. They come with behavioral competencies, with preferences, with various kinds of agendas. And so what that paper is an exploration of, if we take that seriously, the fact that evolution, of course, evolution is very opportunistic. It makes use of everything it can. We know that. What can we conclude if we take seriously the idea that evolution will not have missed the fact that it's dealing with a very powerful agential material, that these cells already know how to do things? And so what I do in that paper is run down all of the implications. What does it mean for evolution that it isn't working with Legos? It's working. And of course, people have used evolutionary computation, like genetic algorithms and things like that, with materials that really are dumb. So the typical evolutionary algorithm is done over passive data, and it shows it shows you improvements, but the material is very passive. And here I'm saying biological evolution isn't like that. So what does that mean? What will that do to evolution? And that's kind of the flip side, right? A lot of people study how evolution gives rise to intelligence of different types. I sort of reverse that, and of course both are happening simultaneously. But I looked at the other side of things, which is, how does intelligence impact the actual evolution, the intelligence of the substrate?
Sure. Well, that's interesting. It's so thought-provoking. Can I tell you something? An impulse I had while reading the paper, even though it's not stated explicitly, and even something you just said. How do you view even the evolutionary process? I mean, it almost sounds like evolution is an agent in and of itself. Do you view it that way, or how do you look at it?
Yeah, this is an interesting point. That's a paper that is on my list to write. It'll probably be next year at this point. But this idea of evolution itself as an agent, I want to be very careful here, because a lot of people still have this kind of ancient view that there are two kinds of things in the world. There are dumb material things the machines, the quote unquote machines and so on. And then there are the mindful things like humans and angels and God and whatever else, right?
Mhm.
And so when I say, actually, I do think that there's a lens on evolution which does use it which does see it as an agent. What I'm not saying, okay, so super clear, not saying that evolution has a high level purpose, the way that a human level purpose or a beyond human level purpose. Not saying any of that. What I am saying is that there's a very rich spectrum of agency from very low. I'm not sure there's a zero, but certainly from very low all the way to human and beyond. And I don't think we can blindly assume that the level of agency for the evolutionary process is down at the low end. It might be non-zero, and it might be important to understand what it is. But just again, really clear, not saying that there's any human or above level intelligence out there picking where the lineages go. I think that I think Carl Friston probably said this well before me. This idea that you can use that framework so imagine. So there's kind of two ways to think about this. One way to think about this is that imagine a lineage, I don't know, 50 million years of alligators or something. Just imagine some kind of lineage, and you can imagine that whole thing as an agent. It's a very long-lived agent, but we're just bad at noticing agency at different time scales. It's a spatially a huge agent, but we're also too fixated on agents that are roughly the size of like us, right? Medium-sized objects. So if you forget that and assume that agents can be whatever, what is happening there? What's happening there is that it continuously generates hypotheses about the environment. Those hypotheses are cashed out as offspring with different features. Some of those hypotheses are proven false. Some of those hypotheses are supported. Those supported hypotheses go on and shape the cognitive system of the collective to form new hypotheses that might be even better, more correctly describe, reality. And what's interesting is that much like consistent with what I said before, what these hypotheses are not flat kind of first order statements about the world, meaning a hardwired solution and it is what it is. These hypotheses are actually problem solving strategies. They're heuristics. They're like what comes out of evolution is not here's how you be a salamander and that's it. It's a set of policies that cellular collectives can operate depending on what's going on. They're context sensitive. So these it's like instead of generating guesses about the world, what you're generating are policies. You're generating navigational heuristics, right? And so that's what that agent is doing. That's pretty good. That's not super low agency to be able to do that. That's something. That doesn't mean you have self-reflective, I'd love to evolve some humans because that would be just great. Like that's not what I mean. But it isn't, it's being able to generate hypotheses and get them falsified and have this so Carl Friston has some great thoughts on this. Richard Watson has some great thoughts on this. But yeah. There's another way maybe to think about it, which is that the whole evolutionary, never mind the lineage, but the whole evolutionary process itself. And that gets hard. I don't have too much to say about it right now, but I'm working on it. This notion of what actually can be an agent, processes as agents. That's a whole other kind of kettle of fish. So I think, by next year, maybe we talk, if I get anywhere with it, maybe we talk about it next year.